first thing the tower noticed wasn't the silence. It was the landing. Perfect touchdown. Smooth. Centerline. Textbook. The kind of landing pilots joke about taking credit for. But there was only one problem. No one was flying the plane. And worse, no one was inside it. What do you do when a plane returns home without a single soul on board? No pilots, no passengers, no bodies, and not one emergency exit has been opened. This is the story investigators tried to bury in technical language, because the truth sounded impossible. If mysteries like this fascinate you, make sure you're subscribed. Now let's go back to the morning flight 256 left Manila and never truly came back. The sky looked unusually heavy that day, thick gray clouds hanging low over the airport like a curtain waiting to drop. Inside Gate 47, everything moved with the soft hum of routine. Rolling suitcases, quiet chatter, the whir of espresso machines from the cafe across the hall. Nothing in that terminal hinted that every person boarding Flight 256 would soon vanish without a trace. The boarding agent later said the passengers looked almost too calm. A child clung a little too tightly to his mother. A businessman hesitated at the aircraft door, tilting his head as if he'd heard someone whisper from inside. A retired pilot, Captain Raul Vergara, paused longer than anyone else. His expression wasn't fear. It was recognition. At 8:14 a.m., the Airbus A321 pushed back from the gate. At 8:17, it taxied onto runway 06. At 8:19, it climbed through the low ceiling of clouds and disappeared from view. It would reappear on the same runway less than 2 hours later. But every soul inside would be gone. For the first 37 minutes, Flight 256 behaved perfectly. Smooth climb, clean transitions, stable altitude, routine radio check-ins. Then, minute 38, the tower called. No answer. They tried again. The aircraft still followed its programmed route as if nothing were wrong. No deviation, no sudden turns, but the cockpit stopped responding. Another pilot flying above the corridor reported picking up something strange on the emergency frequency. Not words, not static, but breathing. Slow, controlled, and close to the microphone. Then it faded. 7 minutes later, Flight 256 made a gentle, deliberate turn, far too smooth to be a malfunction, and aligned itself back toward Manila. Autopilot wasn't capable of that. At least, not without human hands telling it to. And there were no human hands left. The cargo pilot dispatched to inspect the aircraft approached from the right and steadied his voice as he reported. Control. All the window shades are down. I don't see movement. I don't see anyone in the cockpit. That was the moment panic began creeping through the tower. But what came next was worse. The plane descended flawlessly, slowed, lined up with runway 06, extended its landing gear, and touched down with all the grace of a veteran pilot at the controls. Except there were none. The aircraft rolled to a stop at taxiway Bravo. Engines idled. Systems hummed. Everything was normal, except the humans. When the ground crew opened the main door, a cold gust drifted out, carrying with it a stillness that made one technician instinctively step back. Inside the cabin, every seatbelt was unbuckled. Every tray table was locked. Every bag was secured in the overhead bins. It looked exactly like an untouched display cabin. Not a single sign of panic. Not a single trace of struggle. And not a single passenger. One phone lay neatly placed on seat 14A, screen frozen at 9:23 a.m. the minute the aircraft began turning back. The crew seats were empty, the oxygen masks untouched, the galley drawers closed. It was as if 187 people had simply stood up and walked out into the sky. But the emergency doors, closed from the outside, untouched. Every life vest, still sealed. Every exit path, perfectly undisturbed. Even if the passengers wanted to escape mid-flight, nothing in the entire cabin suggested they tried. They were just gone. The cockpit was worse. The door was locked from the inside. They had to force it open. Captain Razan's seat is empty. Co-pilot's headset, resting on the console. Half-finished coffee, still warm when found. No signs of distress. No emergency maneuvers. No alarms. Just an open logbook with one final entry. Cruising. All normal. Nothing else. The flight computer showed only one manual command entered during flight, and the system didn't record who typed it. Worse, investigators insisted the return command couldn't be executed without a second verification. But the plane did it anyway. The cockpit voice recorder was the most disturbing evidence of all. For the first few minutes, normal ambient sound. Engines, airflow, dials, then wind, as if everything else had been erased. At minute 19, footsteps. Soft, slow, unhurried. They stopped at the cockpit door. A light knock, not forceful, almost polite. Captain Razan's voice came next, distant, confused. Then the recording sliced into silence. Clean, perfect, not corrupted but intentionally overwritten. 2 full hours were wiped. Someone had erased the middle of the flight. And whatever erased those hours wasn't one of the pilots. Not a leak, just a brief atmospheric oscillation lasting less than a second. Like air rushing into a space that didn't exist. Temperature sensors also reported a sudden drop of several degrees inside the plane. The kind of cold found in cabins that had been unoccupied for hours, not minutes. But the timeline didn't allow for that. Unless the disappearance happened earlier. Maybe even right after takeoff. Maybe before anyone realized something had stepped onto the flight deck that didn't belong to the passenger manifest. International agencies reviewed radar logs, weather patterns, military flight paths. There were no spikes, no unidentified aircraft, no atmospheric disturbances. Nothing entered or exited Flight 256. The last anomaly came from the clocks. Every digital clock on board, from cabin screens to cockpit instruments, was off by exactly 1 hour and 17 minutes. The cabin pressure showed an anomaly at the exact moment the recorder cut not a drop. Not fast, not slow, as if the aircraft spent time somewhere unaccounted for. Somewhere not mapped, not monitored, not meant to be flown through. When it came back, it returned alone. Flight 256 was dismantled quietly months later, stored in sections, locked away in a government hangar. And yet, technicians swear that on certain mornings, when the air is still and the metal contracts softly, you can hear footsteps inside the empty fuselage, moving up the aisle as if checking seats that are no longer there. Other technicians refuse to go near it at all, because some things, they say, don't disappear. Some things stay attached to the vessel they came in. In the end, Flight 256 leaves us with more questions than answers. An aircraft that returned home without a crew, without passengers, without a trace of what happened in the sky between departure and arrival. The logs don't explain it. The instruments don't explain it. The investigators don't explain it. Not the disappearance itself, but the uncomfortable truth that even in an age of satellites, tracking systems, and perfect data, the sky can still keep a secret. Whatever happened up there remains locked somewhere between clouds and silence, carried only by the empty shell of a plane that should have completed an ordinary flight but came back as something else entirely. And until the day new evidence surfaces, if it ever does, one reality remains. 187 people boarded Flight 256. None of them ever returned. Only the plane did.